either gold is making nice moves and silver, but I'm not that impressed, and I can explain why. I think that the way I look at it, the U.S. financial system should implode very quickly now, not because of the quantitative easing by Bernanke and all these competitive currency devaluations. They're not really, of course, they're devastating, and they can be devastating to the world, and everybody that participates in it is a little bit dumb. But because of this mortgage documentation debacle, it's so fundamental, in my opinion, that that banks have their paperwork in order, and that contracts exist. If banks omit that, if banks try to tape over that, if a government, a Congress can pass a law to create contracts where there have been none, you're completely lost. Really, it's like being in an airplane with two pilots, and like one of them just doesn't, is only singing like say anthems or something like that the whole time. Or you're in a war with Bozo the Clown and a bunch of flowers. It's just insanity. This is the way it works. That of course people say, well, you just replace those contracts, but that's not the way. That's impossible. Because if there is no contract, then whatever contract you create can be any contract. This is in logic. It's called reductio ad absurdum. It's when if it's not true, everything can follow from it. That's why untruth is such a bitch in logic. There's no way to work around it, and you cannot base any proof on untruth, non-existence. And it is of course very understandable if you have a contract that says the mortgage that you have to pay to the bank is $500, but the bank doesn't have ownership of that house, doesn't have the proof to that it owns the house, then of course you don't have to pay that $500. Now, if you're going to reinstate that contract, create it, are you going to make it 500, 600, 800? What are you going to do? How big of an opportunity is that to stiff people even more than before? And then for a country, a government of a country to allow, to basically attempt to completely pervert contractual stringency, but it completely disqualifies you from any business. You can't do business with with banks, and these banks, they of course they would like to receive the mortgage, and if they can't receive the mortgage, they like to liquidate the house. But as they're trying to liquidate the house, the owners of the people living in the houses find that the banks don't have proof that they own the house, that they weren't supposed to receive those mortgages in contractual sense. Of course, you can look at it with common sense attitude and say, well, these people have been living in these houses for like 5 years and they're still living in it, so they should pay something for it because the bank loaned out the money to create the house. Yes, but that's not how it works. That's not how the game is played. That's not how the hard boys of the banking system play the game. Their speciality is to fuck you over with agreements and contracts. Take for example credit card contracts with the small print, for which you have to kind of build a whole institution in your country, the Consumer Protection Agency, in order to bring some sense to that system. Is there any mercy in that system? Have you ever heard of a bank waiving 127% interest or 27% interest rate on credit debt? No, because it's the contract. That's what they live off. What they live off is making collateralized debt obligations and selling them to people, because these people they trust these banks. They look at them and they say, well, you give me a piece of paper, and I should really be laughing because you could also hand me over a paper napkin. Yeah, no big difference. But because on the piece of paper it says we got 5,000 mortgages with the 3% interest rate coming out of them, and you'll be sharing in that income. I'll hand you over my hard-earned cash, or maybe some asset, or some other thing. But you can't do that anymore now. It's just impossible to do. And whatever collateralized debt obligations are floating around in the banking system, if they're mortgage-backed securities, beats me. I don't want to have them. Even if I had so much money to contemplate of buying one or owning one. And among those people that have this issue right now are central banks. So that's not a good thing. And big banks. And what about the other contracts? What about the futures contracts? For gold, or for silver, or for oil, for steel, for whatever. Does the bank have the paperwork in order to appropriate, take ownership of the steel when it is produced? Will the steel be produced? It's there's a whole different subject, but if you have mining futures, is a precipitous rise in the cost of mining because of the cost of fuel is increasing because all the commodities prices are increasing? Is that incalculated in the value, or isn't it? Because these operations can simply stop because they're no longer possible to do. It's exactly the same as a company that tries to, as a country that tries to dump its currency in order to drive the export of companies that produce goods in it. But then these companies find that they cannot buy the raw materials anymore. They cannot import them anymore. And they cannot produce anything anymore. That goes for all kinds of commodities as well. How does the farmer, if you sell grain futures, I don't know what time frame they are, but anyway, that's a whole different subject. How solid are these contracts? How solid is the whole administrative bulwark of the financial institutions of the US? It sounds like it's all crap. It sounds like it's all like Wild West cowboy style, and they just couldn't get enough eager interns to get it all right. They really it's like, talk about pulling the rope on your suicide vest. This is what has happened. Not only the quantitative easing, not only the fraud that is fraud about on a different level, but here you have basically lost grip with the road. And I guess a good analogy for the US recent years is just tires spinning, burning rubber, and trying to get some traction, but failing. That's the whole stimulus program. It's failing. And because of that, to round up this comment, I would expect for gold prices to rise much farther, and there to be a real exodus from the US financial system.